Welcome back to another review here with Scott. Scott is one of our pros in Pro Feedback, and Scott has graciously joined me today. We're going to review one of our members' tracks, Eddie Camano. Sorry, man, totally butchering your name, probably one way or the other. But this is a really cool, energetic, future-based track. I actually took a little preview before we went live here with this recording. So I want you guys to kind of get to know this track first. We'll play it all the way through, and then I'm going to pass it off to Scott. Scott's going to let us know exactly what he thinks first is working about the track, what's really great, and maybe if he can come up with some helpful tips or insights to improve it, he'll do that as well. And then I will kind of come in and round it all off with maybe some extra tips or insights that I might feel I can add to this conversation. And for all of you guys, we hope really as you guys watch these tutorials that you take these lessons and these tips and these insights and you apply them to your own music. And you'll probably start noticing the more and more you watch these, especially here on YouTube, is there's a lot of common themes we keep coming back to. And I've noticed with this latest round of reviews I'm doing with the pros, there's a lot of common themes that we do touch on with these ones. So we'll see how these this track goes. But let's take a listen to Will Be All Right, and let's see what we can do for you, Eddie. Here we go. Wow, killer track, Eddie. Fire energy here. I really was actually listening to this going, this is actually a hit song kind of in hiding. This is sort of a hit song that I could definitely hear if you had the right vocalist on it and a great melody. Like this is 100% top 40 for sure.
Definitely has that pop top 40 feel to it.
Absolutely. And it just had a good feel to it. Like the energy was just really clean. I don't know. It's like sometimes I feel with some music, your heart starts to feel happy, and your track was making my heart feel happy. So I'm like, okay, you have this gift to, with this music you're creating, manipulate my emotion into a really, really cool, pleasant, positive place. So that is one of the hardest things to do about sync licensing music is transmitting an emotion this clearly and this definitely.
Yes.
So however you're doing this, man, keep doing it. I'm going to pass it off to Scott. Now, one note Eddie wanted us to maybe comment on was, he wanted to know, is this too complicated, too complex for sync licensing? So Scott, I would definitely want to let you sort of tackle that as well. I'll give my thoughts
absolutely.
at the end. But yeah, go ahead and go into what first was working about this one.
Well, okay, so what was working about the track was, I got to agree with you, Jesse, it was really it's got a great energy, and it was, the dynamics were really nice in it. I felt like there was a natural ebb and flow with a nice build of the track, build up the momentum and that release and the drops. I mean, that kind of comes hand in hand with this style of music where you have to kind of have that. It's almost an expectation to have those drops and those risers and that sort of thing. But something that is really, I think, a challenge for a lot of producers is if you're going to create something in this genre, you have to kind of shorten that span of the drops and the risers, because you kind of have to showcase all your assets to the track. And you got to do it in such a timely manner that you have to sacrifice that long build up, or, parts of where you strip it down really, really sparse and then build it back up. But I think Eddie does a really good job in kind of capturing the essence of those different sections, where you have your kind of your hook section, your verse, and then you come back in, and it's a nice, I think you nailed it really well there when you said like it was had all the right parts to it. The production quality was definitely there. One of the criteria that we always look for in this is production quality is so important. I always try to see, do the samples sound like they just came out of the box? Or are they like the default VST settings on your synth and that sort of thing, or just, the standard plugins? But nothing here sounded like that. Nothing here sounded like it was just out of the box. It sounded really clean and crisp and fresh. And which I think is always really, really important when it comes to this style of music and working in the sync industry, because then it becomes more universal. You have a lot of it's positive. You could hear this behind a Swiffer commercial, but also you could hear this on a TV show, right? So it has that applicability, which is super important. That definitely worked for me. What else can I tell? I liked the Vox sample. That little singing lead was really cool. It's catchy, right? So I walk away from my computer 5 minutes later, I can still hum it back. And I think to me, that's also a really good sign of a great track when you can remember a piece of it. If I'm a library supervisor, I hear that, I can go back to like, oh yeah, that song with that really cool Vox lick to it that I really like. So that's something that I think was really working well for him. The transitions I wrote down, the great transitional pieces coming from section to section was really good. It was well structured. I like the panning with the rhythms too. That was something else I wrote down, where I could hear the pad on one side and the plucking on the other side. It was good use of audio space. I felt like it was a full song, good stereo use. It was very wide. I think that's what worked for me so far.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I pretty much echo all that stuff. And I feel that, the dynamics here and the building of the track were the best features of it. Yeah. So I felt like even just from the very beginning, good energy popped us right into this cool, epic sort of chorus section. Yes. And then going down into the verses, I really liked how we kind of rested a bit, but then you started building it up again with these horns that you threw in there. So that added the energy, and then obviously building us up until the final chorus. So I think in terms of keeping my interest and keeping the listener's interest glued in, taking us on a journey the entire time through, this is a great example for everybody watching this. If I've ever given you a note like that saying, I'm not really being taken along for the ride, this is a great example of how you should be starting to think about that, where there's never a part where it's like we're just sort of lingering in some place for too long. It feels like we establish ourselves and then we build, and then boom, let's go into the chorus, establish the chorus, and then let's drop back down, let's build ourselves back up to the chorus. So absolutely, the structure and the dynamics here, I think, were the best parts about this. So let's dive into maybe some corrective critiques, something that might be able to help Eddie out here and make this even more licensable. So go ahead.
I mean, a lot of this stuff is subjective, and it could be it all comes down to the listener too. And you always have to take that with a grain of salt when you get the critique for some of these things. I mean, there's some hard and fast rules with structure and that sort of thing. But some of the sound design stuff, I always tell my producer clients, maybe these are things that you might want to consider. You don't necessarily have to do it, but this is what I would do. In this case, what I would do is I would probably add a little more low end to the track. I could hear the nicely saturated 808, but it didn't have a lot of punch in that lower frequency in that kick. And with this style of music, you need to have that really punchable, punchy kind of low end kick and bass. I think that's such a characteristic of this style and genre. So that would be something I'd pull out a little more. I just noticed it could be a little bit, it was nicely saturated, but it could be just a little punchier in that lower frequency. Something that I thought of, when it comes down to loops, especially if you're using loops in this style, you sometimes can feel kind of limited when you have that Vox sample, that da 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 da. If you could, play with octaves with it. So take that sample, throw it through a sampler or whatever your VST is, or whatever DAW you're using, and maybe pitch it down 12, and then listen to it and have a nice low. And then maybe play it up high, for another section. That way you're still keeping that melody. Maybe you can't recreate that perfect Vox sample by scratch, but you can certainly manipulate it in the song. Another thing is you could pitch it, or you could create a harmony of it. And then you got to play the harmony, and you can A/B that harmony off of each other. And one side you might play it, higher up on a pitch and one side lower, and kind of go back and forth. So when you get to that middle part and you're scratching your head and you're thinking, okay, how can I change this up a little bit so I don't get that ear fatigue you just mentioned? Maybe you could add the octaves or harmonies or A/B stuff. And that might be a way. You're not reinventing the wheel, so to speak. You're not making it sound too busy. You're not recreating all these crazy counter melodies, but it's still versatile and dynamic. And now you've added this whole other asset to the song that might catch the listener's ear.
Perfect.
I think that was it. That was like, those were the only things I could really, really find to critique, because everything else, it was very well done. It was a great track. And I don't think it was too busy, because you have to remember, there's a lot of audio and visual information that your audience is going to get in the foreground. So you're kind of serving as that you're going along for the journey with the song, like you said. And so, if you start adding in other things, it'd be too busy, but I don't think it was too busy at all. I think it was a nice kind of fine line between, with your instrumentation, between sparse in certain points and busy in other points, which helped build that tempo, build that energy, and then kind of dissipate. I think it was really successful.
Perfect. Yeah, I would agree with that. It definitely is not too busy. I can tell when something's too busy. In fact, I haven't come across too many EDM tracks lately, actually probably ever, maybe in our services that we've done here in Pro Feedback, that have been too busy, at least just my experience. Where I hear a lot more of the busyness coming in is with rock and metal tracks. A lot of metal producers are throwing in crazy riffs and licks and odd tempos and crazy drums fills and trying to be more technical than they are focused on the groove.
So true.
You're definitely more on the groove here with this track, which is really great. So I think my only couple of notes would be for you is I felt like the first verse, which came in here around, it was like 30 seconds on, I felt like the drums could have been a little bit more developed in terms of maybe some more maybe claps or a different kind of a snare. I felt like there was maybe a little bit lacking in terms of just like a full drum production sound there. I think the choruses wasn't bothering me just because there's so much other stuff going on, or maybe you beefed up the drums anyways in the choruses, but the verse here really did need a little bit more development, mostly with that snare clap kind of a sound. Then as you build up towards the second chorus, I felt like we needed to hear more of like a snare roll, and also maybe more of like a white noise riser. So you had this kind of cool kick that was going doom, 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 dun, 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 and kind of building up with the kick, which was good. But I felt like it was like incomplete. We needed something to complement that on the higher frequency spectrum. So whether that's going to be a snare and a white noise riser, or just a white noise, or just a snare, you kind of decide how you want to do that. And then you had this little breakdown here after the second chorus, and the kick was still going, and I wanted the kick to be gone. I kind of almost wanted us to just really rest. So one thing that everybody needs to remember when we create these dynamics in these different parts of our tracks, all of the instruments need to be like singing the same thing in terms of they all need to be saying the same. They need to be, communicating the same emotion. So if we're in a breakdown, which is supposed to be restful, peaceful, maybe even suspenseful, but definitely more calmer than what was going on right before it, well, having a kick underneath that's pounding away is not very calming, right? Because that's energizing. That's energizing the track. So we want to make sure that whatever we're throwing into a particular part of the track, it needs to all be saying the same thing, right? So either it's saying calm, relaxation, and sometimes kicks can't say calm or relaxation, so they need to just get out, and just basically cut those things out of there.
That's a great point. I never thought of that.
Yeah, and when you have these other, strings and horns and that kind of thing, if it's really a calm place, make sure those strings and horns, whatever melody or progression they're saying, they're performing, they are saying calm, relaxation, or tension, whatever it is. So just always have that secondary conversation going on in your mind of like, what is this instrument saying, or what is this part of the track supposed to be saying right now, or what is it supposed to be communicating emotionally? And are all of my instruments all communicating that emotional message? So that's one of those things that can really help you make sure that you have that focus in your track. But across the board, Eddie, this is very, very licensable. Oh, and the last note I would give you is I kind of want to maybe hear some low horn, either stabs or just low horn, just blasts going on in the choruses, especially maybe on the second half of them. And I think if you add a little bit more of that horn action into this track, you do have some of them here and there, but I think in the choruses more, this actually could get into sports easily, but I think it needs to have a little bit more impact. Right now, it's a really kind of pretty sparkly sounding track, and I think if you want that sports appeal, it's got to have a little bit more kind of like a testosterone, stab or a drive of some sort. And I think those low horns can really give it that. So maybe experiment with adding a little bit more orchestral horn kind of action or Brahms, whatever you want to do.
Absolutely. I was going to say
into
that.
your track, and you'll see
idea.
not only you'll get ads out of this and commercials, but you can get reality shows and sports. This can be a huge kind of opportunity for you. So keep up the great work, and I hope you guys enjoyed these notes that we gave. Scott, obviously, thank you so much for your time today, man.
Absolutely.
If anybody wants to get feedback like this, and you want to work with somebody like Scott, or you want to get feedback from me through our monthly live reviews where I do something like this with everybody live, you can join us in Pro Feedback. In the description box, there's a link. You can actually learn more about what we do here in Pro Feedback and why it became one of the most powerful platforms that I've ever put together, and why it's literally making a huge difference, like night and day difference for a lot of our members who are actively submitting to us and getting regular feedback. It's an amazing service, and I highly encourage you to at least check out and consider joining us.